I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Engage and Lead Live. Each episode, I'm going to bring out some aspect of engaging and leading your team that matters and can make a difference in not only your own leadership, but also in your business or organization, whatever the case may be. First of all, these are designed to be much more relaxed and informal. But I do want to let you know we will be covering some key issues or key things. Today, I want to talk about this word balance for a moment. You see, we have a tendency to want to be comfortable, right? We want comfort. We want to make sure things are not uncomfortable. In fact, we try to avoid discomfort as much as possible. And so as a result, we seek out ways that we can find balance. And there's a lot of talk about people trying to find balance in their work life, in their personal life, and family life. And how do I juggle all of this? How do I balance it? How do I find balance at work? And it's an interesting concept to think about whenever you think about balance. So I grew up studying martial arts, and that was one of the key aspects of what we did. And as an athlete growing up, whether it was in martial arts or whether it was in basketball or volleyball, everything is centered around balance. And it makes sense that in life we want to have everything centered around balance, and we want to keep our balance. It's kind of funny, whenever law enforcement officials do any type of DUI tests, they typically have someone stand on one foot and lift a leg, and they try to balance, right? This is a common theme. The problem when it comes to leadership and when it comes to business is that oftentimes balance is actually the wrong thing to try and achieve. I'm not saying you shouldn't have some balance in certain areas, but balance as a goal, especially in leadership and in business, is something that you probably really need to try and avoid instead of trying to capture and trying to find balance. So let me break that down a little bit. When I was talking about being comfortable, that's what balance is. Balance is a place of comfort. And leadership and in business, whenever you're comfortable, you become complacent. In fact, I was talking with one of my mentors and leaders, a friend of mine, and this is a while ago, and we were talking about comfort zones and being comfortable. And he mentioned that comfort is the beginning of the end, if that makes sense. It's that time and that place and that feeling of being comfortable that leads you to complacency, and then eventually leads to, in the business world, it eventually leads to death. And so that's something that you really desperately want to avoid. You want to be uncomfortable in a lot of senses. So I want to talk about this a little bit. And the best way that I can think of is to just draw this little graph about what everything looks like when it comes to finding balance and avoiding balance and things like that. First of all, let's talk about growth. Growth requires you to be uncomfortable. In education, they call it dynamic disequilibrium. It means purposefully putting your students on edge or purposefully putting them into a place of discomfort so that they are forced and challenged to move beyond it. That's what we're really looking for. And so here's, if you look about where people are in frustration or anger or engagement in work, if you go right in here and right in here, you have levels of frustration and levels of angst or anger. Specifically, frustration starts right in here and it's going up while this. So if you think like Sisyphus, right? I don't know if you know about Sisyphus. If you're trying to roll this boulder, if you're at this point enrolling it and you're trying to move your business, you're trying to grow your team, or you're trying to do something, this is where the struggle comes in, right? This is where some of the frustration, or even some of the trials and struggles that you experience in business and in leadership come in while you're trying to push this boulder up the hill. And in order to move past that, you have to get the boulder up to about this point where you begin to start relieving some of that strain, some of that stress, some of that frustration. The problem is, most people, when they get about right here, they're willing to push and struggle, but once they get about right here, they get frustrated, they're tired, and they want to give up. Right? So I have a sales team that when new leads come in, I have them working those leads actively every day. And I tell them, you have to call, you have to text, and you have to email your leads whenever they come in. First of all, immediately, because that's when you're going to get your greatest response, but you also have to do it multiple times. You can't just say, well, I tried to call them, but I couldn't get a hold of them. See, it's this area of frustration that you have to get past. Man, I just can't get a hold of them. I've called them every day. Well, how many times a day did you call them? Well, I only called them once. Well, have you tried calling them twice? Maybe you just got them at a bad time. Maybe they're busy. Whatever the situation is, you have to continually push until you move over this part of frustration and over this mound and over this hill until you get to this point where it starts to relieve a little bit. And then here, when that gets to the top of the hill, that's when we start to relax. We're like, I made it. I got that sale, or I got that deal, or I've taken my business to this level. Now I can just sit back and relax. We've made it. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I've gotten where I wanted to get. I'm good. And then what happens is there is a point in here that is either going to roll backward or it's going to roll forward. If it rolls forward and it starts to go down here, this is the downturn of your leadership or your business. Once it gets to this point, now this is the area where people start to recognize things are not going right. And then there's some denial in this area, right? There's some frustration that begins to start happening again. Because they're like, man, I don't understand. I've done everything. We got to this spot, and now things are falling apart again. Whatever the situation is, it's harder. Get this. It is harder once you get to this point to go backward than it is to go forward from this point. Because whenever you get to this area, when you get here, you're starting to get done. This is where burnout begins to take place, right? And we talk about burnout with leaders, and this is when people start to leave their business. They get frustrated. They start to put up the businesses closing sales, right? This is the area that certainly is, if not the end, it's almost the end of your leadership or your business. That's where it takes double the effort to go back up. But if you recognize where you're at, whenever you're kind of at the top, we have two different areas that you have to balance between. Like the word. You have to actually move this. And in fact, if you want to keep your business at the top, you have to be off balance on purpose all the time. You cannot be within balance. If you're balanced, that means your business is going one way or the other. It's either going backward or it's going forward to a negative place. But you want to be able to keep it striving so that you have to be either side of this, off balance on purpose, so that you can keep your business and your leadership afloat. Dynamic disequilibrium isn't just an educational concept. It's a concept of how you, as a leader, can approach your business and approach your sales team or approach your team whatever your business is, and if you recognize the areas where you begin to get discomfort, your past frustration, you've built everything up, you've pushed this boulder, whatever that boulder is, whether it's new sales, whether it's expanding your business, whatever the situation is, you've got to the point where it's rolling in the right direction. It's going the right way, taking the right path, but you, as the leader in that, have to be off balance. You cannot keep your business afloat or your team afloat if you are balanced and comfortable. You have to get uncomfortable. And you have to stay there even though your natural inclination is to not stay there because you want to get comfortable. Look, I understand it. Been leading teams and doing this for a long time, and one of the things that I see is when we get to this point, we want to take a break, we want to rest, we're done. But if you want to take your business and your leadership to the next level, you can't be done here. You have to get off balance and you have to stay there. One of the challenges that we face is helping our teams recognize this concept, right? Because I have salespeople that I can pinpoint where on this graph that they're living, right? I have some who are struggling to get their clients, they're struggling to get their customers into the store so that they can take care of them properly. They're trying to work in this area and some are frustrated. Some have gotten to this point where they're trying to figure out how to keep all of their sales going, right? They have different leads coming in from different areas, and they have to try and figure out how do I keep all of my leads centered so that we can grow the business. And they have to figure out how to be off balance on purpose. And you, as their leader, have to show them how to do that, right? The other side of it is you have to try and avoid your people going downhill, right? Because like I said, once they get to this point, they are disengaged. You want to keep them engaged up here and off balance on purpose before they start to go downhill. And whenever you start to recognize, like I said, this is where they start to move or become disengaged. At this point, they are pretty much actively disengaged, meaning they really don't care anymore. And all they're there for is possibly to get a paycheck until they can get their next job. But if you can keep them from moving into the place of disengagement, you can keep them actively engaged by having them off balance on purpose and helping them understand the importance of being uncomfortable while they're at work.